It became apparent that Charles's employee, Junior, had been openly undermining his leadership, going so far as to dismiss Charles as a competent boss altogether. Charles overheard these disparaging remarks, which led to a tense confrontation between the two. In hindsight, Charles should have realized the importance of fostering a stronger relationship with his team. On the other hand, I received an offer to relocate to our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I declined, weighed down by the ongoing issues and wanting to be supportive of Charles during his turbulent time. However, after much thought, I accepted the position and am now preparing for the move. My father, understandably concerned, has been adjusting to the idea, and we've started practicing video calls to stay connected once I leave. This new role has been a lifelong dream of mine, and I'm eager to pour my energy into this exciting opportunity. As for Charles, he rarely contributed to household chores, yet this never seemed to bother Angela. When they went out, Charles typically took the lead, allowing Angela to relax and enjoy herself without stress. Their relationship seemed balanced, or at least it appeared that way. Everything shifted when Angela's mother suddenly passed away. Angela was at work when her father called to inform her that her mother's condition had taken a sharp turn for the worse, and she had collapsed. Rushing to the hospital, Angela barely had time to say her goodbyes. She decided to stay with her father to help manage the funeral arrangements. When she informed Charles, he claimed he couldn't leave work on such short notice. As a result, he missed the wake and only arrived in time for the funeral. Unprepared for the occasion, Charles hadn't even dressed appropriately, and I found myself in a frantic scramble to find something suitable for him to wear. Despite my efforts, he made no effort to hide his irritation, blaming me for not having prepared his clothes in advance. The heavy emotions surrounding the funeral, along with the responsibilities that came with it, made Charles's complaints even harder to bear. I eventually decided to ignore them, hoping to avoid a confrontation, but this only seemed to worsen his mood. Since that day, our marriage has become increasingly strained, with arguments becoming more frequent. Disagreements aren't uncommon after 4 years of marriage, but Charles's behavior has grown more combative. He constantly insists on making decisions and dictating what I should do, and it's been draining. I've tried to push back a few times, but his unfamiliarity with the simplest things in our home has turned minor tasks into drawn-out frustrations, accompanied by his never-ending grumbling. As time went on, I realized it was often easier to handle things on my own. Even though Charles continues to make demands, I haven't always followed his instructions, opting instead to take care of tasks independently to keep my life running smoothly. Recently, I brought up the upcoming gathering to mark the first anniversary of my mother's passing. When I reminded Charles, his response was indifferent at best. He complained about an important meeting scheduled on the same day, questioning how he could possibly attend the memorial. His excuse was that he couldn't delegate his work, especially since his recent promotion, which he never missed a chance to flaunt to his junior staff. I was barely able to contain my frustration as I tried to convey how important the memorial was to me. It was painfully clear that he prioritized his new title and responsibilities, often leaving me to manage everything on my own. No matter how much I urged him to focus on our family's needs, his work always seemed to come first. Later that evening, when I finally arrived home from work, I found Charles sprawled on the couch, a beer in hand. "Sorry I'm late. Had to stay for overtime," I explained, already sensing his annoyance that dinner had been delayed. His response was sharp. "I've been waiting here for an hour." While it had only been an hour, and knowing that cooking wasn't his strong suit, it baffled me that he hadn't thought to get something to eat in the meantime. I had told him when I'd be home. After all, trying to keep my irritation in check, I handed him a takeout box and said, "I thought cooking would take too long tonight, so I grabbed this on the way home." Charles's reaction was swift and cutting, slamming his beer glass onto the table. "Takeout again? You're really slacking off lately, aren't you?" His words stung, especially considering it had been nearly 3 weeks since we last ordered takeout. Yes, I had been busy and couldn't cook every night, but I always ensured we had balanced meals and didn't rely on processed food. His uncalled-for critique left me debating whether I should even respond. Sensing my silence as an admission of guilt, Charles pressed on, adding insult to injury. Can't argue when it's true. Huh? You should start doing your chores properly. You've been coming home late, claiming overtime, maybe you're just out cheating. His accusation ignited the resentment simmering inside me. If you know I'm working late, the least you could do is make dinner. I shot back. You don't even have to cook. Picking up takeout isn't that hard. I always tell you when I'll be home, and despite my workload, I manage all the household chores. There's no need for that attitude. His response was a sharp glare, followed by a low blow. You're 4 years older. Remember? I could have married a younger woman, but I chose you. He spoke as though I should be grateful, like his choice of me was a favor I didn't deserve. You should be thankful and listen to me. No one else would want you. His words were meant to belittle me, but instead, they revealed just how broken our communication and respect for each other had become. So, if I left, you'd be in trouble, right? My anger boiled over. If you wanted a younger woman, you should have married one before we got together. I asked you if you were fine with my age, and you said yes. That's why we're married. But trust me, I can manage just fine without you. Charles responded with a mocking laugh. Fine, then let's get a divorce, he said, grabbing his beer and the takeout before storming off to his room. We had fought plenty of times before, but this argument felt different, like we had crossed a line. I was tired of his constant disrespect. I sat down with my takeout, trying to calm myself, hoping maybe he was just hungry and irritable, but as I ate, the weight of our conversation hung heavily on me, especially with my mom's death anniversary just around the corner. After some time, I called out to him from outside his door. We need to leave by 7 a.m. tomorrow, so I'll wake you up around 6 o'clock. There was no response, though I was sure he was awake. I went to bed, feeling a mix of exhaustion and unease. The next morning, I woke up early to find that Charles was already gone. The bags I had packed for us were still in the room. He hadn't left for the gathering without me. So, where had he gone? I tried calling his phone, but there was no answer. He ignored my texts too. Left with no choice, I left him a voicemail and started getting ready on my own. As I waited for the train at the station, Charles finally picked up. I have a meeting. Can't leave it to my juniors, he said curtly before hanging up. I stood there, staring at my phone, feeling a mix of anger and resignation. I stood there, stunned and bewildered, as the train arrived. With no time to dwell on it, I boarded, struggling with the luggage meant for both of us. When I finally reached my father's house, his anxious eyes met mine as he asked, "Where's Charles?" Seeing the lingering sadness in his eyes since my mother's passing, I didn't want to add to his worries. Forcing a smile, I took a deep breath and replied, "Sorry. He got called into an important meeting. He was supposed to come." Charles's recent promotion made for a convenient excuse, and I reassured my father that his absence was work-related and important. My father nodded understandingly. "I know he's working hard. It's a shame not to see him, but your mother would have understood. Let him know he's always welcome here," he said softly. There was a hint of sadness in his words, but I kept my smile intact throughout the day, refusing to show how much it hurt. The day passed without a word from Charles, and as night settled in, I chose not to reach out either. I decided to stay the night at my father's house and return home the next day. As planned, though it felt almost childish, the thought of making Charles his favorite meal, hamburgers, crossed my mind for when I got home. The following day, I left my father's house and returned home around noon. Before heading out to the grocery store, I wanted to drop off my bags. As I walked into the living room, I immediately noticed Charles's dirty laundry scattered across the floor, a sight I was all too familiar with. With a sigh, I thought, he still hasn't learned how to use the washing machine. I tossed his clothes in with mine, and after a brief moment, headed back to the living room. That's when something caught my eye. Sitting on the table, as if left deliberately in plain view, were divorce papers, already signed by Charles. My heart sank. Was this really how he wanted to communicate that he was serious about ending our marriage? Staring at the papers in disbelief, a storm of emotions surged through me. Grabbing my phone, I hesitated for a second before calling him, unsure if he'd even pick up during his lunch break. To my surprise, he answered almost immediately. "What's the meaning of these divorce papers?" I demanded, my voice a blend of confusion and anger. Charles responded with a cold, mocking laugh. "What's there to question? It's exactly what it looks like. I don't want an older wife who won't do her chores. That's why I want a divorce. If we split, I can find a younger wife. A wife's like a status symbol, right? I can't exactly boast about you." His words hit me like a punch, reducing our years together to nothing more than a transaction, turning what I had believed to be a partnership into something shallow and superficial. Charles continued, his tone indifferent. "It's tough when my team asks about you. It's awkward avoiding the topic." I was speechless. His blunt criticism was stunning, and I found myself unable to respond. "If you don't want a divorce, then start doing your chores properly," he continued, as if this was a reasonable request. "I'll be home as usual tonight, so don't forget to grab some beer. If you disagree, take the divorce papers to court. It's up to you." With that, he hung up, leaving me reeling, my mind spinning with shock and disbelief. Charles probably assumed I'd give in to his demands, thinking that I did the housework because I was afraid of losing him or worried about appearing incompetent. Perhaps he saw himself as the dominant figure in our marriage. Some might think being married to a younger man sounds exciting, but in reality, it was far from glamorous. I had often played up his youth, but if I was honest, Charles was painfully average in looks, personality, and income. There was nothing exceptional about him. Describing him as younger had merely been convenient. When we first got married, the 4-year age gap had seemed more noticeable, but now, in our 30s, it felt trivial. It was exhausting to constantly be labeled the older wife when we were essentially the same age. Fed up with his arrogance and the hollow foundation of our marriage, I grabbed my bag and headed straight to the family court. Submitting those divorce papers felt like lifting a weight off my chest. As I walked out of the courthouse, a sense of relief washed over me. I realized then that I didn't need Charles to feel complete. With the promise of newfound freedom, I felt lighter, as though I had finally stepped out from under a cloud that had long been looming over me. This was the end of our marriage, but the beginning of a life where I could truly live on my own terms. Seizing the opportunity, I decided to take a few days off from work. Fortunately, my boss understood and granted me a week's leave, as work had slowed down. Now that I was officially divorced, it was time to get my life in order. With only a few possessions, the cleaning and packing were straightforward. I stored the larger items in a storage unit, packed the essentials and clothes into my car, and on a whim, decided to visit a hot spring resort. During the off-season, I easily found a budget-friendly hotel and set off, thrilled to start this new chapter of my life. I was savoring the peaceful atmosphere of the hot springs and enjoying the relaxation of my hotel room when my phone rang abruptly. "Angela, didn't I ask you to get beer? Where are you?" It was Charles, sounding puzzled and slightly irritated. It was around the time he usually returned home from work. I couldn't help but chuckle as I answered, "I'm at a hot spring resort." "A hot spring resort? Why? What's going on?" Charles's voice carried a mix of confusion and agitation. "Didn't you say I should file for divorce if I disagreed with you?" I reminded him, picturing his stunned expression, which made me laugh even more. Wait, did you actually file them? His tone shifted from bewildered to frustrated. Yes, I did. You suggested it, Charles. Have you forgotten what you said? I replied, still amused by his reaction. Charles's voice, now tinged with anxiety, showed his disbelief. Wait, are you joking? When you say hot spring resort, do you mean some nearby spa? If so, I'll get dinner. Come home soon. I couldn't help but laugh at his sudden shift to a seemingly considerate tone, as if he was trying to play the caring husband. It took me about an hour and a half to drive here. There's even an outdoor natural hot spring. It's incredibly relaxing. I hope it doesn't rain tomorrow. Since you're getting dinner, I've already packed my things, so you won't have to worry about me coming back. Take care of yourself. Charles pleaded for me to return, but I had no intention of going back. You're the one who initiated the divorce. Have you forgotten? It was clear you were using the threat of divorce to control me. I told him firmly. I can manage without you now that you've divorced your older wife. Go ahead and find a younger one if you can. Whether you succeed or not is no longer my concern, I said firmly. Charles fell silent, clearly taken aback by my determination. After a moment, he spoke again, his voice barely above a whisper. But you should consider moving out of that apartment. Why should I? I responded calmly, though I had already considered this myself. Think about your income. You'll end up broke if you stay there. You can't clean, do laundry, or cook. You'll need housekeeping and dining out, which costs money. It would be a problem if most of your salary goes towards rent, he reasoned. I couldn't help but smile slightly. You thought you were the provider, but my salary is nearly double yours. You never really provided for me, if anything. It was the other way around, I said, cutting to the core of the issue. Also, you were overly confident because of one junior. But did you know I manage multiple juniors and even more beneath them? I usually keep work to myself because you get moody, but I outrank you in both position and salary. You'd think you would have noticed after living together. It seemed like Charles was just now realizing this, possibly because he had kept his ego intact by looking down on me. Now that his delusion was shattered, he must have felt defeated. I had struck a blow to his pride, a kind of retribution for all these years. The reason I had handled household chores without complaint, despite his domineering attitude, was partly because he was younger and I had given him some leeway, and partly because it was too much trouble to ask him for anything. It's not like I needed you to stay with me. I was just managing your needs along with my own. So when you said, do the chores, or we divorce, of course, I chose divorce. We're strangers now. Goodbye, I said firmly before ending the call. Feeling a sense of liberation, I enjoyed a delicious meal at the hotel afterward. Charles, evidently still clinging to the idea of reconciliation, attempted to reach out again, but I was already relishing the newfound freedom and independence in my life. When he called once more, I greeted him with a knowing smile. Remember, I'm older than you. I'm sure you wouldn't want me back. It seemed that Charles's search for companionship with younger women had not been successful. Eventually, he realized his situation was not favorable and decided to move out of the apartment. To handle the division of assets, I hired a lawyer to ensure I received more than just an equitable split. I sought additional compensation to reflect the years I had managed most of the household chores. Charles, always looking to cut costs, opted against hiring legal representation, giving me a considerable advantage. With the help of my lawyer, we secured a settlement that was highly favorable to me. I was satisfied with the outcome and relieved to have resolved the matter. Meanwhile, Charles's troubles at work were only beginning. His junior team member had been openly critical of his leadership, undermining his authority by declaring he wasn't a proper boss. Charles discovered these complaints, leading to a heated argument, another clear sign of the importance of nurturing and supporting your team, something Charles had evidently neglected. In terms of my career, I had been offered a highly sought-after position at our company's overseas headquarters. Initially, I hesitated to accept due to the personal upheavals and out of consideration for Charles. However, with my personal situation evolving, I decided to embrace the opportunity wholeheartedly. I am now actively preparing for this exciting transition. Though it has caused some concern for my father, we've adapted by practicing video calls to stay connected once I'm abroad. I feel content and excited about the future, ready to fully commit to this new chapter of my life. It's time to pursue the career I've always dreamed of, confident that I've made the right decisions for my future.